Okay, welcome everybody. Appreciate having you on. This is another one of our series of online presentations. Today, I'm happy to introduce Todd Hiscox. He's an accomplished platform tennis player, and I just want to remind everybody: make sure you keep your video on if you want to get all the credits, and also participate in the chat rooms when we get to that point. Stay on for the full course. Todd has been teaching paddle tennis now for over 10 years, running camps in the Boston area, and he's got over 100 or more players in his program. He's also a very accomplished pickleball player and teaches pickleball too, but he's got some interesting solutions to monetizing your platform tennis program. So please listen carefully, and this might be something that you will be able to benefit from. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Todd Hiscox. Excuse me.
Afternoon, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to watch the video. So addressing platform tennis, the first thing, number one, is I can't stress this enough, to do your certification course. For everyone, it's a new sport. We all come from tennis backgrounds. The certification is number one off your list. That is the by far fastest way to get up to speed in platform tennis. You have the skill sets already from coaching, which is going to cross over to platform tennis, but it's definitely a different teaching material. You're going to learn the lingo. You're going to learn the quick ways to get people playing platform tennis. So that's really, really important, number one. Secondly, the best experience for players to get, or sorry, for coaches to get, is to play leagues and tournaments themselves. You have a lot of tennis pros that transition into paddle, and they get employed and start coaching paddle, but they haven't played the sport very much yet. That's very common. Obviously, we have coaching talents and we have lots of skill, but there is something to be said for, this just cut out. Hello? You guys there? Sorry, I think I lost you for a second. So there's something to be said for gaining experience. So I'll give you one example, and it's very common to seasoned paddle pros, 10 years, 20 years, it doesn't matter whether they got to a national ranking or not. We've all been through the process of playing some elderly seasoned paddle players from our clubs as our first match, and we've basically all been handed it to us and got our butts kicked by those players on court. It doesn't matter what tennis level you are. If you don't know the screens, you don't have the concept of paddle and positioning, it's the rite of passage. So that playing experience behind certification, I just cannot stress that enough. Most pros are done with their tennis playing careers, so they sort of feel they're more coaches, which is fine. But behind getting certified, the next best thing is to just get experience on the court. It's going to hurt the ego a little bit. There's different ways of doing that. Early stages for me, I met with members from another club that was local of mine, and we would get some practice in. And that's one way that I got my skill level up on the platform tennis. So that's very, very important. Certification and get playing experience. Far too many pros start teaching with very little playing experience. So first off, we'd just like to address, so this is how to monetize the paddle program. So once you've been hired to take on a platform tennis program, now it's time to monetize it. This is usually where everyone starts to run around frantically trying to ask people, local pros, directors, how to get a paddle program up and running. The USPTA, I think, offered how many certified pros there are for platform tennis, and it's astoundingly low. I mean, you're in the couple of % of tennis professionals that are certified in platform tennis. So finding help is quite difficult when you want to start a program. So hopefully this can help. First off the bat, if we're monetizing a program, we certainly don't want to lose money either for the club itself, give them protection, safety. Injured players also means loss of revenue. Platform tennis, as we have here, injuries and safety is really, really important. It's a lot more aggressive surface. You've got the metal gridded surface. You're oftentimes playing in inclement weather. It could be snowing, it could be raining. And oftentimes the platform tennis court is away, tucked in away at your club where there's not so much access and overlooked by staff members. So that's really important to know. It's typically your setup. So you want to have the defibrillators in the hut and accessible. You also want to have first aid kits accessible in your paddle huts. That's first off the bat. Some of the common injuries for platform tennis involve the calf muscles because it's very explosive, even a little bit more so than tennis. You've got the shoulders. That's because of the heavy weight of the paddle. You've got elbows, again, the weight of the paddle, and you've got knees. Knees end up getting stuck on the surface. That's very common as you're changing direction. What happens on any tennis court, as we all know, even a hard court, there is some give. Even on a hard court paddle, there's no give. So once you stop, the only thing that keeps moving is your knees and joints. So very important. A lot of these things, the good thing is that correct technique for paddle and learning positioning is super, super important and will help you avoid a lot of these injuries straight off the bat. To give you just an example of that, right now, just with a simple serving technique, and here's an example. In tennis, you're usually extending your forearm. In paddle, you can keep your elbow quite low and make a very low contact, keeping your elbow very, very relaxed. Another example is there's predominantly now underhand serve. So you can imagine hitting an underhand serve and learning that technique. That's hugely beneficial. And underhand serves are played at the national level. So just to give you an idea, those are two examples. The serve in paddle is way different than the serve in tennis. It's almost quite opposite. You're looking at a very low ball toss, very low elbow, and lots of momentum moving into the court. So different trajectory, different technique, but that service tip alone would keep your paddle players healthy, which is important. There's many more techniques like that that will help keep your players on court, because that's what it's all about. Especially beginner players that you have out. Here's another example. The paddle itself is basically glorified wood. Think of just plywood basically stuck together, surrounded by a metal edge. It's very, very heavy. So when people are on a platform tennis court with the dimensions, you've got beginner players out there. It's very easy for them not to pay attention and to easily back up with that paddle and do some serious damage. This can cause a lot of damage to someone on a paddle court. So beginners is where you're going to see those mistakes and those injuries taking place. The other thing is junior players. So again, and we'll get into this later about monetizing, but juniors is going to be a big part of your program. Juniors, when you have them on court, you're going to want the 5-year-olds out there playing on the paddle court. But when you get 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, it doesn't really matter, all those young ages, you have to be very, very careful, even more so than tennis, because you don't have the separation that you do on a tennis court. So that's super, super important. Again, you've got the metal edging. Maybe think more like a golf club sort of scenario on a platform tennis court. It's really, really important. Safety first. A lot of pros don't know that, and they'll get out there just like they're on a tennis court. The kids are right next to each other, and it just takes one mistake. So that's injuries and safety. It's very important to know that. We're talking about monetizing our programs. Next up, we're going to introduce tournaments. Tournaments is a big part of any platform tennis program. And in fact, It's one of the first things that you're going to start to schedule. Besides clinics and besides social events, tournaments is one of those things that you're going to schedule. If you have some experience organizing tournaments for tennis, welcome to platform tennis tournaments. They're completely different. The first thing is usually the number of courts to run a platform tennis court. You're looking at, in Boston area, we're known for building clubs with only 3 courts. Some of them now have 4 courts, but that's about it. Some areas like Chicago, New Jersey, you'll see a few more courts than that. But still, you're limited. When you've got some clubs that might have 10 plus 15 tennis courts, most of those clubs still only have a few paddle courts. So that's really important, knowing logistics before you run your tournament. So when you run your tournament, we have a lot of back draws. It's sort of the rite of passage for paddle tournaments. That's very similar to a lot of country club style tournaments where you have usually a back draw, but you'll even go into like a third back draw, last chance draw. I find that you want to guarantee a minimum of 2 matches, but you really would like to have everyone play a minimum of 3 matches for a club tournament. Different levels. Some of those matches might be quicker than others. So if you do 3, you've just got a lot better chance of having them have more fun in a tournament. When you do 2 matches, they lose 2 matches, there's a less chance that one of those matches was a bit more comparable to level. So with your number of courts, it also means, just circling back to the first point, it also means that you can do a lot of draws that don't need to be multiples of 4. So we're all familiar with like a 16 draw tournament, or obviously a 64 draw tournament. But in tennis, platform tennis, you can do, it's very common to do 18 teams. You can do 9 teams. You can do 15 teams if you have to. There's lots of different ways to do that. And the reason is you're never having an even flow when players are getting off your court and matching to the bracket. Where you've got 4 courts and those come off in tennis, you can throw the next round on pretty soon. In paddle, it's always flowing slightly uneven, but it always makes up in the end. A little hard to explain until you've really ran one, but just know that you don't need even brackets of multiples of 4 like you would, or some of us think we need for a tennis tournament. Also, the matches can be quite quick, especially in the early rounds, because you're not chasing around 2 tennis balls on a much larger court. And this is my theory. You've got 1 ball in a very small court, and it comes right back to you because of the parameters of the screens. Matches can be really quick in platform tennis. So you want to take that into consideration when you're running your events. We have weather. Weather is something you're only going to learn about if you're starting to run your first few tennis tournaments. Weather is where the experience really kicks in. You've got to make sure that your heaters might be on the night before if you're seeing any inclement weather. That's really, really important. So you've got to work with your maintenance team, or you got to have someone over there. What happens, a lot of clubs, members play the day before, you've got your heaters running, and they end up switching off your heaters. The next day you turn up for your tournament, you could have, a couple feet of snow on the court. So those are little things that can happen in regards to weather. Now, we say it's an all-weather sport. You can play through rain and snowstorms and that sort of thing. Rain can be probably, the least desired weather to play paddling. Nobody likes it. I sort of have a rule of thumb. If it's a tournament, I try to train my members that, for tournaments, we're going to try and push through it if we've got some inclement rain weather. Sometimes if it's pouring rain and you have an option, you could go to put your tournament on another date. Rain, though, is a factor, but nobody likes playing in rain. It makes the ball skid. The matches are usually off kilter, and it's a massive equalizer. So your tournament, you can get some interesting results in the rain because of what it does to the ball and the play. So moving on to the format, we talked a little bit about the format and the numbers of teams that you can have in an event. We talked about you don't need an even number of 4. You can go with the country club style where you do pro sets in early rounds are totally fine. The trend is that a lot of the pros are doing less of those and doing like 2 sets or even 3 sets because they're finding that, you know, those first round matches aren't going as long. And again, it's because of the parameters. You're not chasing 2 balls like you would on a tennis court. You're pretty much picking that paddle ball up and starting the next point. It's a very, very quick to start a point in paddle, so it flows a lot quicker. Types of tournaments. So for paddle, you may know this, you may not. You're going to do all your standard tournaments. You're going to do your men's member guests, your ladies member guests. You're going to do your men's club championship, your women's club championship. You're going to do your mixed club championship. You can do mixed member guest club championship. And you can also do a club championship for juniors. So that's really the goal. You might not be able to pull them all off in a first season, but you're certainly going to set a lot of those tournaments up as you get going with your program. That's the goal. It's very similar to how you would in club tennis. So next we have the social events. This is really going to be where you can definitely make money on social events, but also this is where you can really grow your program. Paddle is known for being the social sport. Some call it the beer drinking sport, but certainly in the depths of winter, after a good paddle match, everyone goes inside a paddle hut and usually has a beer. So it's very social. It's a lot different because the proximity, when you turn up to your club to go play on the paddle courts, they're all very close together. So it's a very unusual feel, different to the other sports. So that creates a lot of social interaction. So you're right next to the foursome that's playing next to you. You're and so forth. So golfers have mentioned at country clubs to me that they've actually had a far easier time meeting players and meeting just people in general because of platform tennis. They've turned up, they had their court booking, and they saw maybe 8 to 12 other people that typically if they're playing a round of golf, they'd only see their foursome for the whole 18 holes. So very sociable. You also got the hut. That's a very concentrated area for people hanging out. And usually the facilities outside are more concentrated near the paddle court. So lots of opportunities for socializing. So that's where food and beverage comes in. We just ran a tournament, club championship tournament. We had the tents outside the paddle hut. We had some of those propane heaters outside for members to stand under. We have a fire pit. Not all clubs have those, some do, with the chairs around it. That was off to the side. And then we had inside the hut, we had a buffet for the players that they could come and get, soups and things like that. So they could actually play and come off the court. But that's something important. It's challenging to organize because your club's food and bev department is usually very far from the paddle courts. If it's more of a commercial or public type facility, I'm sure that you can just, you can order up some food and find a way to keep it warm. But that's important. Having a big cooler out there with plenty of ice for beverages, very important for an event. And the warming hut is just sort of par for the course for running any sort of paddle event. It's really hard to do in the depths of winter if your club does not have a warming hut. That is the biggest factor to having successful events and tournaments. So warming hut is a little clubhouse area that's right in amongst your paddle courts if you've never seen one before. Extremely important. The format for running socials, I've had a lot of luck with just doing 20 to 25 minute rotations. It's social, so it gets people on and off the court. You can have people rotating in. So on a 3-court facility, where 12 players are only playing at a time, you can beef that up and maybe have 16, 18 players. I've heard people have up to 24 players turning up for that event and rotating them around for a couple hours for a social tournament. So a social event. The entry fee, I mean, the entry fee varies for these types of things. Just remember the cost of paddle balls are expensive. Around $20 is usually a good starting point for a social event. And if you're charging $20 and you've got 16 people or so out there or more, that's usually, you know, if you're going to compare that to running a tournament, which would take the whole day, you can see how social events can be a real winner. At club level, the tournament entry fee, again, of about $20 is comparison, but you're going to spend more of like the whole day because people are playing full length matches and you're tracking a tournament draw. So that's important to know. We're moving on to the 2 ways you're going to basically make your revenue from your paddle program. 2 ways. This is it. Your junior program and your ladies program. Okay. There might be a very small percentage of people out there that would disagree with that. We'll call them the unicorns in this business. It's juniors and ladies. So your ladies program, really the goal of that is to try to fill up your Monday through Friday 9 to noon slots with what I call contract clinics, and we'll get to that in a moment. So you would have 9 to 10:30 slot and a 10:30 to noon slot. And you'd have those 5 days a week. If you could fill those slots and have people in regular clinic lessons, that's a home run. You can certainly work on that. You've got to work on training your members and how they sign up for that. It's a little different than tennis. It's not like the drop-in style. Contract clinics are more like, okay, find some friends. You want to learn together. There's huge learning advantages to that, learning paddle together. And you would slot them in on those 9 to 10:30, 10:30 to noon slots. But contract clinics, very important. You'll only learn more about that in this business, but that's 4 players to a court or 3 and the pro. Okay. Junior clinics, you're going to start in your afternoons. Okay. Those can be ran 4 or 5 times a week up to the pro, but that's how even an inexperienced pro can definitely bring in a lot of revenue. So it takes the least amount of experience to run a junior program for paddle if you're starting off at the younger age groups. Starting from around ages 5 all the way through, you've got a lot of skill development on the court. They're not going to play anything that looks like paddle maybe until they're like 9 or 10 plus years old. It's very, very difficult to play off the screen, but they're certainly going to learn lots and lots of skills just like they do on the tennis court. Lots of hand-eye skills, lots of ball skills, movement skills, lots of things. You can also use the screens on the side of the court as backboards for them to hit against. They can volley against it. They can learn drives against there. And you can have a ratio there of up to about 6 kids. You could do a few more, but I think 6 is quite a lot on the paddle court, running a group lesson. You can spread them all around the outside of the perimeters of the court and do tons and tons of drills. So that's just a great way. It's their exposure to platform tennis, but also picking up a lot of skills for racket sports. So we talked about contract clinics. You may have a few more questions on those. You only have 3 or 4 paddle courts, so you're not going to lock all your courts up wondering whether ladies are going to show. Really, really important. You don't want to get stuck doing that. That is definitely a tougher way to get going. So try to not lock up your courts like you would on a tennis program. A lot of pros have made that mistake. It's a little bit more work, but if you can work with your membership, have them reach out to you. You can make a phone call to ask them if they've got some friends. Emphasize it's really good to learn as groups. That is the best way for people to get your program going. You need 4 people learning the same thing to start playing together. If you have 4 people taking a lesson, the next week, 2 of them aren't there and they have 2 completely different people. One paddle lesson, can feel like you've just missed out on like 8 tennis lessons. It does feel like that, and you're not progressing the group. So really, really important. And that's where we get to ratios. So just keep in mind, you can't open up courts for the drop-in factor and not know who's going to show up. You also don't want to take more than 4 people on a paddle court. You can in the beginner level, and if you've got a lot more experience, but the ideal player who works themselves up to playing level in paddle that can competently rally, they don't have to be superstars, but they're going to want 3 or 4 players on the court. 3 to 1 is by far the best ratio. 1 pro to 3 paddle players, they can get far better rallies, and they really, really appreciate paying for that. All right, so the coaching revenue for platform tennis and what it can do for your programs. Oftentimes you're a tennis pro, you run that tennis program, you're also running paddle. What it's done is it's rejuvenated a lot of pros tennis programs. Okay, it's been hard over the years, excluding COVID the last summer, to keep tennis programs alive. When you introduce platform tennis, it not only builds you a platform tennis revenue, but you create or attract a lot of different players to your paddle program you might not be getting on the tennis court. Then you can keep that momentum over to tennis. Golfers. I mean, I just started a brand new program at here at my club. We have 750 members. The amount of golfers that we had that wouldn't step foot on a tennis court, they're all into paddle, men and women. And it's much easier now for me as we're starting up tennis season to go ahead and transition them into the tennis. So an avenue that not everyone, first of all, sees or looks at, thinking how platform tennis will help your tennis program. Pricing is a lot different in platform tennis. Again, the reason is you don't have as many avenues as your tennis program. Usually a tennis program, you're going to have maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 assistant pros for the summer. In platform tennis, you're going to have 1 director. Maybe if you're lucky, you may have 1 assistant. Okay. You might be able to snag a couple of part-timers, but that just means you've got limited pros, you've got limited courts. So you really need to maximize what you're doing on your paddle tennis court. So that's where we come into circling back to contract times. You want to have a rate for 3 players. You want to have a rate for 4 players. You want to have a semi-private rate and a private rate. If you really want to grow your program and increase revenue, and it's better for the players, you want to look to do clinics. Private lessons are not really a growth phase for platform tennis, and quite frankly, that can sometimes hinder someone's learning, especially in the initial stages. They really, very helpful for them to learn with 4 players on the court. They're not going to learn a screenshot in your first lesson, but they want to learn how to actually play in the flow of the game, serving and volleying, returning, and the game of errors, all of those sorts of things. So privates, definitely not big on my list. It has its moments for certain players. If they want to learn screenshots and get a one-on-one, that's certainly when you can utilize privates. But really growing a program, making it better for everyone, is getting the more players you can teach the game of paddle to, the more benefit to your program. So pricing can be a little different. I would say it's okay to offer a couple of, if you want to call them sign-up clinics or drop-in clinics, that's totally okay. Just know that they're going to be the most difficult lessons you're going to teach every season, because you're going to get a lot of random levels showing up. Someone, hasn't taken a lesson before, someone has. They only drop in and out once or twice. It gets a little tricky, and even more so on a platform tennis court than a tennis court. And this is largely due to the nature of the game and the nature of coaching. This is the final point I'll make. When you're coaching platform tennis or learning platform tennis, it's play-based. So it's a lot of playing lessons. It's not like a golf lesson. It's not like a tennis lesson where you're standing at the range or you've got 150 balls that you're hitting to someone's forehand. It's play-based. So that's going to help. If you realize that it's play-based, a lot of your answers will be, a lot more clear when you factor that in. So play-based lessons is where platform tennis coaching is at. Okay, 4 players on a court. They want to learn how to play the game. If you get them playing, they absolutely get hooked on the sport. Okay, you're not going to spend your first lesson teaching a forehand, your second lesson teaching a backhand or a volley. And I don't know if people are even still doing that in tennis, but certainly not platform tennis. It's very play-based. In fact, most of my lessons, I would say about 100% of them with the top players, we do a couple of drills and then we're playing out different scenarios. It's play-based only. So that's it for me for now.
So Todd, the poll's up. Progress. Can you see that?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. Steady.
Hey, Todd.
Yes.
Yeah, you might want to talk about, I don't know if you addressed balls are interesting, whether you make money off of the balls or not. And also when you're teaching how it's really easy because you don't have to have a basket of balls, really just 2 or 3 balls in your pocket.
Absolutely. Is this a question live for the group you want me to answer?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
When I came
Okay.
up, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, so everyone heard that question, Mike?
Go ahead. Sorry.
Hear that question?
Yeah, we heard that question.
Great. So, so very important, the price of tennis balls, I mentioned it, platform tennis balls. I mentioned it for when you're running tournaments, you got to factor that into your fees, also into lesson pricing. Basically, it's $5 or $6 a ball these days. It's only increasing, so that's quite expensive, one paddle ball. And when you're teaching, a little different than tennis, you're not going to pull out a whole basket of balls where you're getting up to a couple hundred balls in a basket. You're going to have, in fact, you want to limit the number of balls that you're using. If you have to do a few drills, you would maybe have a maximum, 20 balls is kind of a lot. You've got to be very careful because of the parameters. The balls will roll underneath people's feet. And if you roll on a platform tennis ball, it's very unforgiving. It's a little soft, but it's quite firm. Your ankle, you're just going to fall straight over and onto the metal surface. It's really, really important that you've got to approach that part of coaching different than tennis. You cannot feed the ball and have all your paddle balls all over the court. That takes a little experience, but I would just start with minimal balls on the court to start off with your coaching. A lot of the balls will come back to you anyway using the wires, so you'll be totally fine in a lesson, but limit the number of balls. The other thing is that there is something to get used to when you play tournaments or a league match and you're putting out balls for your members. You usually try to limit the new ball for a playing ball, and you have a warm-up ball. Warm-up ball is basically a used paddle ball that you're going to have somewhere at your club lying around. Those are what you're going to warm up with on one side, and on the other side, someone else is warming up with the new ball. That's very important. You don't want to warm up with 2 new balls, each match. If it's raining, you're going to go through a lot more balls because the felt comes off quite aggressively in the rain. So you'll definitely, you'll go through your ball expense. It is something that you want to sell through the season. You can make money off balls and paddles. You're going to have your sleeves of balls. It's usually the one play or one item they can't get anywhere else is usually balls and paddles. Now paddles are sold a little bit more online, but for a sleeve of paddle balls, they might be $17. And that's for a sleeve of 3 paddle balls. So there's definitely significant cost to selling and using paddle balls during your lessons.
So Todd, there's a question there too about paddle and pickleball, and is it competing or what do you think? I know I can just real quickly. Today I taught 3 hours of pickleball down on platform tennis courts, and 4 of my women who are my platform tennis clinics, they said hi. We started talking, and they're going to sign up for pickleball lessons. So I know you do pickleball, and now with paddle going through the summer months too, this can be a continuous, not just a seasonal source of revenue. What do you think?
So this is the toot my own horn moment here. So maybe one of the only pros in the country. Maybe there's only a few in the world that have had the opportunity to teach squash, platform tennis, pickleball, and tennis, and be certified in all 4 under one country club, which I did in Massachusetts. I was the first to bring the pickleball onto the paddle courts in this area, and I think that was back somewhere around 2014. So I am a big fan of, again, to making the point of paddle will improve your tennis program and vice versa. Same with pickleball. You get more sports, more activity at your clubs. It certainly takes some experience to know how to not compete against each other in some ways. You're going to have to explain to your members the benefits of the different sports. One of those is, and I could give you many, many examples. I've competed nationally in pickleball as well, is the weight of a pickleball paddle. For those who want a little less strain on their arms, that's the least strain you're going to have on all of the racket sports with a pickleball paddle. And all the swings are, for the most part, are under the height of the shoulder. You're not doing a ton of swinging above your shoulder. So pickleball, for those players, you might push some into pickleball who may have some existing injuries and whatnot. But absolutely any extra sport. So I brought paddle. It has the same dimensions of platform tennis courts. So I brought pickleball to the platform tennis courts up in New England here. And now we were the first club to have there's a surface by Nextpro, I believe it is, a plastic surface that goes on the top of the paddle courts. In my opinion, you don't necessarily need that, but now there's about 4 or 5 clubs, and it's growing, that's getting that plastic surface on their paddles. So during the summer months, personally, for me, it's very new, so I'm giving you new information. I don't think it's 100% necessary to get that surface, so you can keep your paddle plays in the summer, and you can still very effectively play pickleball on a platform tennis surface. It takes some marking out with a chalk. You can be as accurate as you like. The lines that I do, I'm kind of picky, but they look quite professionally done, and they're very straight, and it looks like someone put the lines in professionally. You just get yourself some oversized chalk. You get a good tape measure. You get a good straight. You could use a 2x4 if you wanted to measure out the lines so that you can get really accurate drawings of your pickleball. And it'll last several days. It might not last like 5 or 6 days without having to reapply pickle on the paddle. But yeah, back to the answer to the question, coming from my experience with the amount of racket sports that I've played, you can throw in padel if you want to add another sport that I've played and competed in. But I'm a big fan of adding. And in fact, we currently have pickleball on our courts at our club, on our platform tennis courts. So absolutely.
Hey, Todd, we have a couple more questions before we break into in some of these here in terms of if you do pickleball on the platform tennis, how do you put the kitchen line? I know that you mentioned a month ago you use chalk when you do your drilling in that. So do you want to elaborate on that? And I'll give you two other ones in terms of pickleball.
Yeah. Well, you've got to extend your center service line, and you've got to take in your kitchen bowl measurements and it's pretty straightforward. It's just a matter of getting the chalk out and making your measurements and going ahead and doing it. It's only a couple lines on a platform tennis court.
And then the next one is any advice on starts something on private courts in the areas where there's no platform tennis clubs? Any advice on that?
So we're referring to private platform tennis courts?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are a little challenging because usually the maintenance is not up to scuff. I've played on a handful of those. But yeah, maintenance, it would be my number one, thing to address. You're going to have to get there very early to make sure that that court doesn't have a whole bunch of sticks, twigs, leaves on it. It probably hasn't been, hasn't been shoveling snow off during the winter. How often is the heaters are being running? Do they have heaters? Do they have lights? What's the light situation? There's lots of factors in that on it because a platform tennis court does involve so much. The snowboards, are the snowboards loose that someone's going to put their foot right through the snowboard? So I would just be very, very cognizant of the fact of what condition paddle court you're going to be teaching at. So it can work certainly. I would just be wary of those things.
And then the next question is it's pretty obvious. No, does the pickleball does it wear out quicker on a platform tennis court? And another one is that spec tennis is an up and new coming thing in New England, or actually on the East Coast versus the West Coast. I know that's relatively new here. So in terms of the ball lasting longer, what are your thoughts?
Well, so balls aren't lasting long at all on pickleball courts, in general on hard courts. They're breaking very, very fast. I don't know if it's the manufacturers and whatnot, but so no, the answer is not really. They get a little bit more worn because of the metal surface, obviously, but when you're disposing of a pickleball, it usually gets cracked, and that's when there's not a huge change in that because most pickleball balls are getting broken fairly quickly these days anyway. It's just the nature of the games. People are getting used to turning them over a bit more regularly. So I would say not so much. It gets scuffed up, but not so much.
And then the last one question that was earlier, someone mentioned about playing racquetball, some of their players, probably some old school people playing racquetball. Do you find some of those people that are like more effective in terms of training or maybe getting certified or help teaching the game in your
so I missed, coming from Australia, I missed the whole racquetball explosion in the US. That's kind of amazing how that just completely died off. All the gyms that had them, you can still see remnants of that of racquetball, but it definitely brings the racquetball players back to paddle, back to a racket sport, which is paddle, also pickleball. There is some advantage to having some experience in a game like racquetball, where you know how to take a ball off the back wire. Squash play is a little similar, although I find that squash players have a difficult time driving the ball in paddle. They find it's a very hard, because they have to adjust a little bit more to a tennis stroke. So squash players, they may take the ball out of the back, but they have a tough time driving in paddle. But pickle, yeah, there's some experience off the back wall. Padel's the same thing. If there's anyone from South America and whatnot that have been playing padel, there's some experience that will help you with platform tennis.
And then Todd, the last one, we were going to do the breakout session now. You had a couple questions that you mentioned earlier that you'd like to, so once I break everybody out automatically and you can jump in and out, but you have a couple questions they can all talk about because we have quite a large group of platform tennis people here. So do you have anything that you'd like to do before we break in? We go for 5 minutes and then we come back and we can discuss some more questions. Anything that you would like to see? I knew one of them that you talked about was their playing experience. And then the other one,
Yeah.
go
So
ahead, sorry.
It seems like a high percentage. It may have been like 80-something% of the listeners aren't certified in platform tennis. And there's a fair amount with minimal experience. So, it'd be nice to, see what really the interest is in getting certified. How many of them would just answer yes to getting certified if they're currently not certified? That would be important to know. And I mean, are they is anyone currently at a club that has platform tennis but no pro?
There you go. All right, so we're gonna do this right here. So once again, everybody, you have to admit yourself in terms of getting into the room. Hi, Lance. How's it going over there? Oops.
Uh,
Are we still in the breakout room?
no,
No, we're out of the
I think
breakout
we're out.
room.
I
Todd,
think
you're
we're
up.
out.
Hey, Todd, so does anybody want to get one or two more questions to Todd here? Otherwise, we'll have a drawing for a paddle.
Todd,
Yes.
you were talking about Owl's Nest and the paddle coaches up there.
Yeah. So Owl's Nest is basically commercially open now to pros running platform camps in the area. So really, if you want to run a paddle camp, I've done a bunch of them at every big club in Boston. Fortunate enough that my friends sort of let me in there and invite a few guest pros. I've done it with some players that have been #1 in the country in paddle, some players that have been, top 5 in the country. So I had my business that was called Paddle Solution. We go around and run these camps. They're highly sought after. If you have a reputation in your area, you probably have to have maybe a prior national ranking to really host one. That is attractive. And they host them in September, usually because the weather and nothing's competing in September. The weather, #1, and also you're transitioning from tennis season into paddle season. So September's the big month. I think Johan Durant up there took all the slots that were available because he's found out he's making some money out of it. So he's up there most of September right now. But those are the camps. I mean, I may recommend going to one of those if anyone's sort of newer to the game. Absolutely. I'm trying to do it a little bit more on a local level this fall at our local country clubs and offer it for players, and maybe even a few coaches might show up.
And then in our prior conversation, Todd, you mentioned possibly maybe getting a dozen certified USPTA pros at platform tennis certified that maybe possibly do a clinic this year or next year, to give them some tips and a little extra training.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say step 1, definitely everyone who's looking into getting certified. If you're on this, you're definitely I would just get certified straight away. I'm the tester in the Boston area. Obviously COVID held some back, so we probably have a bit of a backlog to get people certified. So absolutely, though, I think everybody, if you're thinking about, paddle as coaching at some level, definitely get certified first. And then what I'm finding is there's a lot of people that have been certified, maybe not by me, and they didn't probably learn as much as they were hoping. I just give you guys, the guy that certified me had been doing it for 25, 30 years. His name's Mike Gillespie. I should mention him because he was a legend of coaching the sport, tons and tons of experience, very technical. And I still teach a lot of the stuff that he taught me about doing clinics with platform tennis. So very, very helpful. So I ran one just recently, and it was kind of nice to hear that one of the assistant pros over at the country club here in Boston said that the same for me. He said, Todd, I've really just been using everything that you went through in that certification my first year of teaching, and it's been brilliant. So that's literally my experience from getting certified, and I would really like it to be everyone else's experience when you get certified. But just remember, play the game. You don't want to be teaching great lessons, but also not know how to play. I'm sure we could teach a good lesson first, but you really want to get out there and play. Very important.
Great, Todd. And then last question with Mr. Sharton. He was asking if you're building a new paddle facility, how many courts would you build?
4. 100% build 4. And someone also mentioned is paddle growing and competing with other sports. Paddle is growing in the East Coast, anywhere where you're getting snowy, cold weather. It has a special pull to it. So pickleball is not a competitor. It's this winter cold weather sort of skiing feeling, where it's just a very unique playing outdoors in the middle of winter, and the social element. It's very, very unique. So it has really no competition. And paddle players on this will know what I'm talking about. There's nothing better than feeling after you've had a good paddle match in the dead of winter, wondering why you're not even feeling the cold. It's very, very unique. But you know, it doesn't have competition because of where it's played. If you're in warmer climate and you're trying to get paddle going, sure, it's going to be, or platform tennis, it's going to be a little bit challenging. One of the other questions someone said, is it paddle or platform tennis? It's paddle to all platform tennis people. There's also another sport called paddle in California, and there's padel, the South American sport. So it's good to know that. Someone just asked me recently, do I know a paddle person down in Miami? And I said, I don't think that's platform tennis. I said, there's 3 names that get confused, and they were actually after a padel coach. So I'm into racket sports. That's why I know 6 or 7 of these, you know, racket sports. But it's important to know that someone had asked on today's question whether paddle, P-A-D-D-L-E, is platform tennis, and yes, it is.
Great, Todd. Well, thank you very much. And Steve and everyone for joining. Our next program is technology tools to use during COVID times. That's coming up here real soon. Also, in regards to the giveaway in the paddle, you'll have to show up to the membership meeting tomorrow afternoon to find out who the winner of that is. So once again, thank you everyone for attending, and those that are attending the next session, we'll see you soon. Thanks, Todd. Thanks, Steve. See you
Thanks,
all.
everyone.
Take care now.
Thank everybody.
Later, Toddy.